takes place. Okay, little line of humor there. Huh? But as we look here in Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 9, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And so again, these verses, I know you've heard them many, many times through the years, and yet there's so much truth to them, and there's so much that we can learn from it. And as I've mentioned before, it's amazing because the Word of God is alive. It's different than any other book. It's authored by God. And it's amazing. There was technically, I think, 40 human writers to the scriptures. But as you look at the writings that we have from them, we see that there's one mind that basically orchestrated the whole Bible as we know it today. And so, again, as we look here, I think there's some things that we can benefit as we look here in Galatians chapter 6. Some things that I think can really help us and maybe think these verses in a different way, but also be able to apply it to our life in a more meaningful way. And so as we look here, my eyes are really, they're not doing very good right now. Okay? They did something else I've never had done. They dilated my eyes 3 times. I mean, did it, and they said, no, we're going to do it again, and then we'll do it again. And then the other thing got me is the 3 eye doctors back to back. As they looked in my eyes, they said, your eyes are very cloudy. Are you aware of that? Something like that. You know, I thought it was dumb. One said, are you aware of that? Yeah, really. So anyhow, that's what we're dealing with. So forgive us if we try to do what we can to get through our message. And again, I don't know with or without the glasses, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. But we sow seeds every moment of our lives. And when I say that, every time we speak, and as we look here in the Bible, it's clear to the law what happens to these seeds, that they do germinate, if you please, they do spring forth. But as we think these terms, again, this law guarantees us that we will reap the benefits or consequences of whatever seed we have sown. Okay? So therefore, we must invest our lives in planting godly seeds that will one day reap a godly harvest. And so I don't know how many of us even think on this, but every time you speak, you're putting seeds out. And so if we're speaking good, then we're putting good seeds out. If we're speaking bad or evil, we're putting out bad seeds. So again, at the conclusion of this lesson, this is what we want you to get, is to understand that they are constantly sowing seeds. And like I said, either good or bad, we're constantly doing that. There's no way around it. If we didn't say, well, I just won't speak anymore. I was a little upset over Wednesday night saying some things I did not mean to say, and I did it, you know. And so I say sometimes we don't think about things because it's what's on our mind, it's what's on our heart. And I appreciate just a few moments ago, Jerry asked Brother Chuck, how you did? And Brother Chuck was real honest with her and told her what was happening. And so anyhow, but she said, well, I wanted to know, that's the reason I asked you. But what I'm saying is we're reaping every time we sow, something's going to come from it. So again, determine to sow seeds that are pleasing to the Lord, okay? So commit to continue sowing seeds even if they are not seeing fruit. And the first time I grew a crop, I actually grew some corn in our backyard there in California, and I forgot to water it. And I remember when the corn finally matured, the stalks were about that tall, the corn cobs were about like that. I mean, really, so I didn't know it would become a popular line. I know the Chinese serve corn like that, you know. I did it by accident. But anyhow, it was funny because the corn seeds I planted were almost as big as the cobs. So But anyhow, and I was a lot smaller back then too, because I was probably about 5 or 6 when I did that. And so, I mean, if they were that small back then, you can imagine. But what I'm saying is, it didn't happen right away that things came forward. And I remember going out the first couple of days and just nothing was happening. And then finally something started springing out. And I also grew some beans, a couple other things. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't happen overnight. And so the saying is true. A lot of times we say things and later on we reap from it, okay? And sometimes it can be a real blessing what we reap, and then other times it can be a curse. And so, again, in our teaching outline, listen close to what we have. You reap what you sow. Isn't that profound? If you plant corn, you can expect corn to come up. If you plant tares, you can expect tares to come up. If you plant wheat, you can expect wheat to come forth. So, and I know sometimes, because I work with Bill enough through the years, and sometimes we get out there and he got beans planted, but there'd be corn stalks all around there, and I think they refer to it as volunteer crops or whatever, because it was left over from the year before or whatever. And so amazing how much you can get from some of those volunteer crops. But what I'm saying, that comes from back when he sowed that back a year or 2 years before. It's popping up again. So again, we see your words, your thoughts, and your actions as seeds. Now, think of that closely again, okay? Because we look at our words, but sometimes I'm afraid we forget about the thought part. And Brother Chuck was saying to me just a moment ago, something to this effect, that what's in your heart is going to come out. In other words, there's things that you're thinking on. And so our thoughts will affect us either for good or for evil, depending on how we think. So again, our actions also are seeds. So people watching what we do. So see, God's sovereignty brings to pass man's actions. We see the conflict over the garden of your heart. And again, our heart is where we, all these crops were planted to begin with, I guess you might say, in one sense. And this is where the seeds come from. So you reap later than you sow, as I mentioned just a moment ago. So do not be deceived by a delayed judgment. And that's what we need to think in terms of. About that, I didn't have any repercussions from that. You know, and so we think nothing about it because we got by. At least we thought we did. And so it's amazing how much time they passed from the time that you did something that you shouldn't have done, and it actually comes forth. So do not get discouraged by present barrenness. And again, do not be distracted by immediate pleasures. Okay? And again, so many times that's what we do. We get involved in the pleasures of this world, and we don't think about all the other things that are happening while we're doing those things that we shouldn't be doing. And again, don't misunderstand me. There is pleasure in serving the Lord. There really is. There's a lot of exciting things that we can do as Christians that do not hurt the cause of Christ. And so all pleasures are not of the world, if you please, but there's pleasures that we get from doing that which is right also. But you reap more than you sow. And again, it's amazing as you plant a kernel of corn into the ground. You can imagine that the farmers just expecting one kernel to pop up. Why would you even bother the farm? You know what I'm saying? But they expect many more. And I think an average ear of corn, I think, has like 712 kernels on it or something like that, some specific number. And that's a lot of corn. You know what I'm saying? And again, then you think on one stalk, how many cobs would there be on one stalk? And so you can see how for that one kernel, how much comes forth from it. So again, we see that we always reap more than what we sow. So take every opportunity to plant good seeds. Imagine the consequences of every seed. And so when you're doing good, you lead somebody to Christ, and then that somebody leads someone else to Christ, and then maybe that person leads someone else to Christ, and on it can go, and that's very, very exciting to say the least. But do not quit on any seed that is good. We need to go ahead and we need to plant if we're going to expect the crop to come forth. And folks, I think it's exciting in the sense that a person that's a Christian can reap after they go to heaven. I think about Paul the Apostle, which we'll be preaching on him, Lord willing, today, or sharing some things about him as we preach about Christ, of course. But you realize that there's people that are saved to this day. They can point their finger back at what Paul did. I've shared the story of the Ethiopian eunuch with you before, and how that the Ethiopian that went to our Bible college, he pointed all the way back to to Philip, that came and shared with the Ethiopian eunuch how to be saved. And he said, I wasn't saved by an American missionary. I was saved because of the Philip that came back to the eunuch and shared with him how to be saved. And I thought, wow, that was almost 2,000 years at that time. And but that's amazing to think that here was a guy that's a eunuch who, because he's a eunuch, he couldn't have children physically. He was not capable of it. But yet spiritually, he was able to have a bumper crop, if you please, that went on many, many, many years. And Ethiopia for many years had one of the greatest types of government until, of course, the communists took over. And they had the longest living dictator. I think the dictator, which he was a good man, he was a Christian. And anyhow, he ruled for like 90 years or something like that, just unbelievable. And then when he died, then the communists took over and things went downhill. But anyhow, what am I trying to say? That's exciting. Can you imagine getting to heaven and seeing the dividends come in and in and in? And of course, we'd be more aware of things that are happening down here than we would be here while we're here. So anyhow, how exciting. So Galatians 6 and verses 7 through 9, in a way of our introduction, as we look at the law of the harvest, our transforming truth today gives us a law, something that will definitely happen. On this earth, we have the law of gravity, and we've seen the effects of that over and over again, have we not? I have a broken collarbone on one side, and I have a broken shoulder bone on the other side, and it was because of the law of gravity. As I was running 2 different times, as I was running, I fell, and one time I fell and I hit, I was on a slope, and so it messed up one side. The other time I just fell flat around and messed up this side. But anyhow, what I'm trying to say, the gravity pulled me down, and as a result, I've got injuries that came from that. I've got 2 grandsons, and they fall, they just bounce, get right back up like nothing happened. And it really kind of worries me, because little Luke, he'll fall on his head, and you think surely that would affect him, and he just gets right back up. And sometimes he cries because he thinks, I guess I'm supposed to cry because everybody's looking at me, or whatever. And I think, man, if I felt like that, I'd be in the hospital, you know what I'm saying? And so we see the power of gravity all around us. Last night I came here to turn on the air, and there have been branches that have been blown down. And again, part of it would say was because of the wind, and that's true. But some of it's just like the gravity that got a hold of it and pulled it on down. So we see all those things. Of course, the rain was coming down because of the pull of gravity. And so on and on we can go. So we see those laws. We're very much aware of those laws. And what was that old saying? What goes up must come down. Of course, we realize that now with some space travel capabilities that we can send things to the moon or whatever. And so they may not necessarily come back down. But again, as we look at the general laws that we have, the law, according to the law of sowing and reaping, we'll reap if we sow. Something will come forth from it. So we need to determine that we're going to do right, that we're going to plant good seed. So this law is exciting because it gives us the confidence that we will see fruit from our labors. And so again, and it says very clearly, if we faint not. And faint not just referring to the fact, well, I just quit, or I'm just too tired, or whatever. This law is also challenging because it teaches us that we will reap from sowing bad seeds also. And so again, it's up to us to determine what we're going to do. So again, remember the wicked seeds and reap the consequences from that. And what bothers me is when I think of those consequences, that my sins, sometimes you can see them in your children. And that hurts. And sometimes even my wife has been affected by my sins. And so again, that's where gets a little, too close, because it's easy for us to say, well, God, why are you doing this to my child? And of course, when I think what Jesus did for the Father, for us, wow. So again, we need to be careful, because things that we do will come back, so to speak, to haunt us. And so again, for the next few moments, we will study the 3 laws of the harvest, okay? So you reap what you sow, you reap later than you sow, and you reap more than you sow. So each of these laws has a specific application that we can apply to our lives. So think of those 3, okay, how they all tie in. So you reap what you sow. And we have an illustration. I don't know if we have any gardeners in here. I know we used to planting stuff. Anybody else? Okay. And I told you about my experience planting and what happened. And a couple other times since then we planted. But have you ever been surprised?
I plant things, they die.
Okay. You plant that dies. Okay. Have you ever been surprised by a plant that grew from the seed you planted? You plant squash, you can expect squash to come up. If you plant pumpkin, you can expect pumpkin to come up. If you plant tomatoes, you can expect tomatoes. You don't plant tomatoes and then, oh, what is that? Anyhow, but what I'm saying is the potential that there's not going to be a whole lot of shock, because whatever you plant is what's going to come forth. And so, isn't it amazing that many times it's like we're praying for some sort of crop failure, I guess, when we sow our wild oats. And we've heard that term so many times. Well, he's just a young man. He's sowing his wild oats. Folks, it's tragic when people sow the wild oats, the things that can come forth from it. And so none of us can afford to do it later. It's just too dangerous to sow and complete the wild oats. And again, the wild oats just refer to just doing your own selfish thing, just doing what you want to do because you think it's going to be fun, or somebody told you it'd be fun. So again, you reap what you sow. So therefore, see your thoughts, your words, and your actions as seeds. And think about how many things start in the heart because we think on them. And Brother Chuck, I know when he was heading that bar, one of his verses that he used quite often, that the heart is desperately wicked, and who can know it? And how true that is, that the heart is so wicked. And so we have to be careful, because so many of our thoughts is where they come from, it's the heart. So do you realize that when you're planting, every moment of every day, we're planting some sort of seeds. And so every thought that you think plays a role in the molding your character, and it is a seed that is sown and will soon mature. So we need to keep all those things in mind. And as I think of different things that affect us, I've got a list right here. And so as we think on these things, first of all, a person who dwells on past hurts becomes what? A bitter person. Not a better person, a bitter person when they dwell on past things. Again, lustful thoughts lead to immoral lifestyle. And so when a person allows things to be viewed and to think on those things, then it's going to produce other actions that will come as a result of what they've done in those lustful thoughts. Again, those who daydream all day often neglect their responsibilities. So we can become infatuated with something and allow that thing to be an idol in our hearts. And again, that's a very, very dangerous thing. So daydreaming, how many of us have been guilty of it? But how many times have we been thinking on something we shouldn't have been thinking about, and should have weeded it or pulled it up or whatever before it really got going? But all seeds of thought need to go through the test that we find in Philippians 4, verse 8. And in this verse, when we were in Vanuatu in the South Pacific, and they were, at that time, this was one of the verses that Lydia and them were translating. And so they had me in there to help them with some of the words. And again, you got to remember that the vocabulary of Islam is only a 10,000 word vocabulary, so very, very, very limited compared to English, which is 255,000 words. So you can see the vast difference. And so it says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, what sort of things are honest, what sort of things are just, what sort of things are pure, what sort of things are lovely, what sort of things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. And so I think that's very, very clear, the importance of thinking upon the right things, and keep our mind on those things which are good, and stay away from those things that are not pure, because they will cause bad problems in our life and also affect others. So notice what it says in James chapter 3, in verses 4 through 8, as we look at these verses again to complement what we just shared from Philippians chapter 4. It says, behold also the ships, which though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And a tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea, is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. So again, emphasizing the danger that we all contain in our head. That's the tongue, and what it's capable of doing, and all the harm it can do. And yet at the same time, the tongue has to be used to point somebody to Christ. The tongue can be used for godly purposes. A tongue singing godly songs can be such an encouragement to others. But the words you speak have the potential to tear down or to build up. And so again, your words could be the difference, or the difference maker in another person's life. Never take lightly the words you speak to others. Every word you say is a seed you plant. And so, again, be careful what you say. Finally, your actions are an obvious seed that you plant. And so the things that you do, you go, well, why did I do that? And really evaluate, why did you do that? What was the purpose? And so it tickles me again watching our grandchildren, because so many times some of the things are still so new to them because they're so young. And sometimes they'll do something, they'll get a reaction from other people, and then they'll do it again just because they got that reaction, and they'll try it, and sometimes they do it over and over again. But anyhow, what am I trying to say? That our actions really affect us, and we need to realize that our actions is another type of seed planting. And so we need to make sure that we're doing the right type of actions that will bring honor and glory to the Lord. So God always sees what you do, whether it's good or evil. He knows what's in your heart, and he can read your heart. I guess like we could read a book, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just, God knows exactly what's going on. So Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. And so, folks, it's up to us to decide, am I going to do good or am I going to do evil? And again, God has not predestined us in ways, but God knows what we're going to do. And so it's up to you to make decisions to do right or to do wrong. So if you believe that God is faithful, you are to believe that he will fulfill the law of the harvest in your life. If you believe he will fulfill the law, you should be watching your thoughts, words, and action, for they are all seeds you plant. Businessman Stephen R. Covey said this, and as he wrote this out, sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. And so much truth to that. So may we all pray for the Holy Spirit to lead us as we sow these seeds every day. And again, I don't care what you say, you're sowing. And if you're saying, you're sowing. And so we can't just say, okay, I'm taking a break. And if you you stop speaking, your silence speaks volumes too. So again, we need to determine we're going to do good, okay? We're going to plant good seeds and not evil seeds, if you please. So see, God's sovereignty brings to pass man's choices. So if this is a law, who is the one administering the law? Who is enforcing it? It is God. Just that simple, folks. He's planning it. So his sovereignty works in the natural kingdom. We put beans in and we get beans out, okay? And the same God who is sovereign over the garden and the same God who is sovereign over our choices. So again, if we sow wrong seeds, we will reap for those seeds. And if we sow godly seeds, we'll reap abundant fruit. Man's proposes his way, but God is the one who disposes the results as he sees fit. And so again, Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, a man's heart deviseth his ways, but the Lord directed his steps. And what a blessing it is when you can reflect on a week, or you can reflect on a day, or you can reflect on an hour, and you can see that God directed your steps. And that's such a blessing, that he becomes your GPS, if you please, and you follow him. But how many times can we look back and go, oh, that was me? And it makes sense, they're so bold, so, well, that was the devil. You know? And so many times we blame the devil for things that we did ourselves. That really, the devil didn't have to encourage or anything, we just did it. So again, it's such a blessing when we allow God to work in our lives. So one of the best examples of this principle of sowing and reaping is in the life of Jacob. Jacob deceived his father. Of course, his name refers to basically comment, what refers to his name as a supplanter. And so as we look at Jacob, he deceived his father for his own selfish gain. And remember what he's trying to do. He's trying to get his father to bless him, thinking that he was the firstborn. And of course, we know there's a twin, that he was the secondborn. There's no question about it. But he went ahead and he deceived his father. So then we see that he deceived Jacob. Later on, Laban, his father-in-law, deceived him into marrying Leah. And Leah was supposed to have been Rachel. And you think, well, how in the world could he, get mixed up, when they committed the marriage act? And again, I know sometimes sisters really can't sound like life. And you got to remember that the lighting was probably not what we have today. Trying to defend Jacob here, but what it says, he was deceived. And again, he deceived his father. Remember, his mother went and put goat's hair on his arms and other things, and got his brother's clothes and put them on him to make him smell like his brother, because his father had bad eyesight. So again, Jacob was deceived again later on, this time by his own sons. And again, what they did, they said that your son, Joseph, your favorite son, has been killed by some wild beast that's taken him and destroyed him. Here's his clothes, see how they're ripped up, and see how they're bloodied, and all these things that they did. Again, it was for their selfish gains that they did this. They felt like if they got rid of Joseph, then one of them could step up in place and become the next favorite son. Wow. So Jacob sowed deceitful seeds, so God's sovereignty, again, allowed him to reap the consequences. And you think of all the things that happened to Jacob. Think of all the things he did, but think of all the things that happened to him because of his sins. You see the law, and again, it's so clear in the life of Jacob. And by the way, later on, he became Israel, and which meant a prince with God. So what a change from the con man, place to a prince with God. It's exciting what God can do. So what a tragedy it was for Jacob to spend over a decade believing that his favorite child was dead, only to find out that Joseph had not died, but that his brothers had sold him as a slave. I mean, wow. In a very real sense, being a slave would have been worse than him being killed. And but again, God's intervention. So how many times have you been reminded of your past, of sowing bad seeds? And you might say, well, I wasn't saved then, or whatever. But there's things that once they're planted, they're going to come forth. So again, if you're living with hidden sin, don't remain comfortable in that state thinking, well, the consequences for unconfessed sin. So, folks, it's important for us to stay and keep track of those sins that we've allowed to come in our life and take care of them. Now, don't put it off. Numbers 32:23. It kind of reminds me of matching bookends, because you get 32:23. So, turn it that way. And so that help you remember Numbers 32:23. But if ye will not do so, behold, ye have sinned against the Lord. Folks, when we sin, who are we sinning against? And truly, we always sin against God. And sometimes I know we sin against other people and other things. And be sure your sins will find you out. So again, referring to the law of the harvesting that we mentioned a moment ago. You may be thinking, I don't know if this verse is true. Okay, maybe you might think back in terms, well, when I was in high school, I cheated, but nobody knows about that, and I never got caught. Or maybe you may think about something that maybe you stole, maybe from a store or something or other, and all these different thoughts that may come through your mind. And as you begin thinking this, you think, well, I got by with it. But really, if you think about any and all, you begin realizing, well, this happened, and could that be? Nah, well, maybe. and you sort of begin to realize, I didn't get by with it, did I? And so, again, how true that is, that so many times unconfessed sins were reminded of things that we did. And it's not amazing. It's just out of the blue, suddenly you have this thought of something that you did, and you thought, man, I totally forgot that was buried, or maybe you dream about it, or whatever. And there it is. So you've got to remember that God is perfect when it comes to recording everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we think. God has it totally recorded. None of it's hidden from Him. So we see the conflict of the garden of your heart. And again, every one of us, if we start sharing some things that have happened, and I don't know about y'all, but I want to share about the good seeds, okay? And the good things that have happened. And again, that's so exciting to me to share those things. I don't want to share about the bad seeds. And again, and it's sad that sometimes people, they can share about things back in the good old days, when I got drunk and I did this and I did that, they go over all these things. And folks, I'm glad we don't have to go back there, you know what I'm saying? And that we should go forward. So your old nature and your new nature are both fighting over who will plant in the garden of your heart right now. Before I got saved, I was totally in the flesh, if you please. But now that I'm saved, I have the Spirit fighting against the flesh. And before, I had a conscience, and there were certain things I've been taught by my parents and this other society, if you please. And so I could do things that were wrong, and I felt bad about it, even though I wasn't saved. And so what I'm saying now, it's even more emphasized because I have a spirit, and my spirit has been saved, and so I have a spiritual battle going on with the flesh all the time. And again, the one that we feed the most is the one that's going to come out victorious, whatever. In one case, it's the opposite of victory because it's defeat every time we yield to the flesh. But Galatians chapter 5, verse 17 says it this way. It says it so clearly. It says, for the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would. And so, folks, again, I think that Paul's emphasizing here that our tendency is just let the flesh take over and follow after the flesh. Because there's so many things that we can experience now. And like I said, it's something that we get immediate gratification from. And I don't mean that in a good way. We get immediate gratification from following after the flesh. Where with spiritual things, it may be some time before you can see any results whatsoever. I mean, it may be, it may be all the way to heaven before you actually realize the good that was benefited by you doing right. And so again, every day of your life, the flesh wakes up and says, I've got stuff I want to plant in the garden. But the Spirit also says, I have seeds to plant in the garden. And every day of your life, there is a battle. To whom you surrender, your garden is key to the successful life. Whom will you allow to cultivate the garden of your heart and plant, if you please, the seeds of future growth for good? So if you want your new nature to plant the seeds, you have to purpose in your heart that you will allow him to. And you do this by casting out every sin in your life, yielding in complete submission to the Holy Ghost. Again, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. And so all these thoughts. And then the second thought concerning the three things that we pointed out earlier concerning the harvest laws. You reap later than you sow. So while you will always reap what you sow, you will usually have to wait to see the harvest. You reap later than you sow, therefore. And yet I realize when it comes to the flesh again, I feel like it's almost always, a little faster that it happens. Because your parents go, you shouldn't have done it. And they take you out and they discipline you. And then later on, maybe God will get you for something too that you did. But what I'm saying is the other, when it comes to spiritual things, it does seem to take a lot longer for you to actually see the fruit that's going to come. And sometimes it does happen right away. Other times it doesn't. And again, it's exciting when you do what's right, when you do what's good. Those do not be deceived by delayed judgment. Ecclesiastes chapter 8 is the Old Testament parallel for the law of the harvest. And this is what it says here in Ecclesiastes. It says, and so I saw the wicked buried, who had come and gone from the place of the holy, and they were forgotten in the city where they had so done. This is also vanity, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily. Therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Though a sinner do evil 100 times, and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear God, which fear before him. But it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are a shadow, because he feareth not before God. You see the parallel between these two verses. And so again, this passage makes it clear that the wicked do not escape their punishment. God sees every action that we commit. He hears every word we say. He knows each thought we think. There is nothing we can hide from him. As our text teaches, God is not mocked, and he will allow sinners to reap the consequences for their wrong actions. And again, how many have been guilty of praying for a crop failure? But again, he doesn't always allow the consequences to come immediately. And however, so don't come to a point in life in which you think that you can get away from sin. Punishment does come for the sinners, and you will reap what you are sowing. So you cannot hide from the sovereign God of the universe, who is not mocked. And so important, of course, to realize that God's aware of what you're thinking. God's aware of what you're saying. So do not be discouraged by present barrenness. In other words, it seems like I planned, but nothing's happened. Nothing's come forward. It is coming. So, again, just as you will ultimately reap the consequences for wrong actions, so you will sow the blessings from godly actions. Whatever it is that you are doing for the Lord, whether or not anyone knows about it, God sees you, and his heart is blessed by seeing his servant walk with him. And so we need to follow after the Lord. Okay? If you're sitting here today feeling your service for Christ has not made a difference, listen to the words Paul wrote to the Corinthian believers here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. Oftentimes I use used this at the interment service. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. So rest assured that you will reap the blessings from sowing the right seeds. But you probably won't see results immediately. It may even take you an entire lifetime. So do not be discouraged. You will reap the harvest for your good seeds. That's a promise. And so again, do not be distracted by immediate pleasures. And again, so many things that can distract us from what we plan on doing. The Dr. Bob Jones Sr., he said it this way: don't sacrifice the permanent on the altar of the immediate. So what a tragedy it would be to miss out on the blessings of God. And so he wants to give us, but how sad would it be if we chose immediate gratification over eternal rewards in heaven? And again, some of our message will deal with that today. But notice what it says in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And so again, think about the story of Jacob, Esau. Again, we see the deception that took place, both parts, if you please. We discussed Jacob's sins earlier in our message, but Esau had some problems of his own. As the firstborn son, Esau was the natural heir to the birthright. That Esau, however, became distracted by the immediate needs. Jacob offered him food for his birthright. Can you imagine? I mean, the birthright was something that was going to last for generation after generation after generation, and all eternity would be affected by Esau receiving that birthright, if you please. But instead, he got hungry, and he decided, and I think it was maybe wolf-brain chili, but anyhow, he decided that he wanted some of that special food that his brother had made. And I don't know if his brother knew exactly how to get his attention or what, but anyhow, notice what it says in Genesis chapter 25 and 29 through 34. And Jacob saw a pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So as we look at the situation here, objectively now, we think it's obvious that this is not a fair bargain at all. I mean, for a bowl of chili, he would sell his birthright. That should have been something that should have been so precious, something that he should have fought for, if you please, and should have been willing to die for you. But Esau was hungry, and he satisfied something that would have lasted forever for something that only lasted for a few months. I mean, how often do you eat in a day? You know what I'm saying? And something that the servants could have taken care of getting a meal for him, and it may have taken a few minutes more for them to do that. They didn't have microwaves back then, so it may have taken a little bit longer to prepare it. But basically, he could have probably been eating something within, just a matter of minutes, because no doubt they had bread already made up and other stuff. But instead, he wanted that chili, and he sold out so cheaply. So God has great plans and mighty plans for you. He has specific ways that he wants to use you. The only thing stopping God from using you is you. Okay? So will you let God use you the way he wants to, or will you continue to be distracted by the temporal? The choice is yours. both offers have permanent results, and we'll stop there, okay? Trust that will help you, encourage you as we look at this next week, and then we'll do what we can to sow some good seed, okay?